you know, I have seen that an effort has been made. I see a lot of Black journalists now, especially on television. I see more, I wouldn't say a lot, but I see quite a few Black journalists on television in Britain. And that's good. That's really good. You know, I remember when I left England in 72 and I came back in 1982. And I was surprised that in the 10 years I'd been away, no one had replaced me. I couldn't, there was no one who was, well, someone else is there as a Black journalist. And that's how I got to make my film Race, Rhetoric, Rastafari, because I was saying that to Jeremy Isaacs, who was just starting Channel 4. And he said, oh, well, why don't you do a film about that for us, Barbara? Do a documentary on the business of Blacks in the media and the Black image that the media must portray. The image of Blacks the media should portray. So, you know, that's really, that was 1980s. So it's good that now finally a real effort is being made to fill that gap, to correct that wrong, I would say.
And what was it like for you in like in the 60s starting out? Did you, I mean, you know, what sort of things did you encounter and how did you sort of overcome it?
Well, you know, you can't really, 50 years ago, you couldn't overcome it. Whatever racism you encountered, you just had to accept because you were brought up to understand that white people will always look at you as inferior and you have to just accept that and smile about it and pretend that it doesn't hurt. You have to keep on because you're living with them. But I remember once when my second TV job was in Birmingham, ATV Birmingham, and one of the reporters there said to me in a conversation about race, if Black people were so great, why did they never paint a Mona Lisa? And I had no answer. I did not know of Zimbabwe. I didn't know of Timbuktu. I didn't know that Egypt was Black people, Tutankhamun. I didn't know. I had no history. I didn't learn any of this till I came back home to Jamaica. Well, Black is Beautiful was happening in the 60s, but it's when I came home to Jamaica and started trotting the Rastafari pathway that I really got to know my history, that I could have answered him then with, oh, well, you know, look at Zimbabwe, look at the great culture of Mali, Timbuktu, look at this or that. I mean, I now could have answered him. 50 years ago, I had no answer. We were never taught our history. From 1600, when slavery started, we knew nothing about anything that was happening in Africa. We were taught about British history. You asked me about the Wars of the Roses, Henry the Fourth, Fifth, or Sixth, or whatever. I can tell you all of that. But don't ask me about Africa. We were never taught. And in the same way, you were never taught. Your school didn't teach you what was happening, what Britain was doing in Africa in 1700, in 1800. They didn't tell you what caused slavery to be abolished. They tell you, oh, Britain abolished slavery. No, Britain abolished the slave trade because it was competing, the other countries were competing with their income in the trade. But slavery was not abolished in Jamaica, at least, until Sam Sharp led the Christmas Revolution. And, you know, plantations across Jamaica were burnt and white people were slaughtered. And at the end, so many hundreds of slaves were brutally punished with death, hanging, 200 lashes. But those things, within 2 years of that, slavery was finally abolished. Well, no, we know our history. We know it. But you don't know it. People don't know why Edward Colston's statue coming down was important to me. I never heard of him before, but I certainly knew his story. He was so repeated, you know, all over. And worse, I mean, maybe he didn't do some of the atrocities of some of the slave masters in Jamaica. I can't repeat some of the stories that I've learned. Just, I don't want to say the words in my mouth of some of the things they did, but the memory's there, the history's there. It's in our DNA. It's in our nation. It should be in yours as well, because then there would be no racism. No white people could hate any black people if they really knew what white people did. They would be like, come on, let's be friends, you know?
So, Barbara, you obviously have a great love for journalism and a great family history in journalism with your father, who I know you said founded the Press Association in Jamaica. Um, what what and it's great that you're going to help us judge this award. I just wonder what sort of things will you be looking for that makes a good piece of journalism, and what's your advice for the sort of young journalists who want to sort of follow in your footsteps?
Well, I think a lot of journalists will be doing stories they were assigned to do. Um, I'd love to see stories that journalists just came up with on their own, but I don't think that should influence the choice too greatly. Um, I like to see the stories. The stories are what are important because, as I said, we need to share information from side to side. And that's what's necessary now. I think journalists who are committed to making that difference, to being teachers, to being teachers in the nicest, kindest way, I think that would influence my choice of a winner. But I don't mind at all. You know, I see a lot of good journalism now. I see a journalist in a wheelchair who does a travel program, a black journalist in a wheelchair. That's really nice. I really like that guy. I like his stories. They're very interesting. He's not speaking as a black person. He's not even speaking as someone, you know, what's the right word I want? There's someone in a wheelchair. He's just telling a story. And the fact that he's black is just another part, is just visuals. That's all it is, because the information he's sharing is interesting and informative and beautifully presented, usually with a smile. So what I would really like to see are journalists who are just journalists. You know, one of my favorite people that I know is Stevie Wonder. And I was introduced to him by a girlfriend in Hollywood. And of course, he's blind, so he didn't know me. I just shook his hand, and she introduced him another time. I shook his hand. He came to Jamaica, and I went up to him and said, "Hi, remember me? We met in LA." And he wouldn't let me go. We chatted. He held on to me. We chatted and chatted. I was in the company of a black movie star, a black, a Miss Nassau beauty queen, and a young American girl who so wanted to be a reggae artist. She had joined the Playboy Club to live in Jamaica in Ocho Rios. So I was with a movie star, a beauty queen, and a Playboy bunny. And I was long skirt, head wrap. It was me he was holding on to. He couldn't see what I looked like. Now that's what the world has got to be like, where you judge someone by the communication you have with them, not by what they look like. Because if it was what I'd look like, he wouldn't have been chatting to me. So why don't we make the world be like that, like Stevie Wonder? You know, why aren't we all doing that? Why isn't every news story like that? It doesn't matter. And I see it happening more and more. I see a black journalist reporting from China. That's really nice. I see, you know, white journalists reporting from Ghana, from the slave museums. You know, it needs that mixture because we journalists can go anywhere and do anything. We are free to travel the world. We take any story. We we look for any story. That's what the profession is all about. We are the vanguard of information for the world. We are the front line of information for the world. So that's what we must be. That's what journalism is all about. And whether we write, we broadcast, or we film, we communicate with the world. We are the vanguard. We're the front line. Every war, we're out there in front. If we're not there, you don't know what's happening in the war. You have no pictures, you have no stories. We are the front line of information for the world. The most important people in the world, I would say.
I agree. Of course, in my job. the So a final question, Barbara. I mean, what are the sort of things that you're most proud of that you've achieved sort of journalistically in your career? I mean, any sort of high points or any, even maybe even any low points, I don't know as well.
Well, I've just written a new book called Growing Up, which documents my life from coming back home to Jamaica to starting on the road to being a Rasta. And it's about that daughter of Jah, growing up daughter of Jah. And in it, I tell some of the highlights of my life as a journalist. I mean, film plays a big role in my life. I was at the Leipzig International Film Festival when Leipzig was part of East Germany. I was a judge there. I was in Iraq. I met Saddam Hussein. In fact, my chapter there is I didn't sit on Saddam Hussein's platform. And he invited me, yeah, and I refused to go because the invitation didn't include my female interpreter. And I was such a feminist at the time. I felt she should have been invited also. So I didn't go on his platform. You know, I interviewed him in the press conference. I've met Fidel Castro. I've done a lot of things, but I think I've perhaps being a senator in the Jamaican parliament is one of my greatest achievements because I was appointed only because of what I'd been writing in the papers. I used to write letters to the editor frequently, and some of the letters would become columns. And I'd written about the Jamaican election in which the People's National Party had refused to contest the elections because they said the voters list was not up to date. And the Prime Minister Seaga went ahead and held the election anyway and won all the seats. But then there was no opposition to vote in the opposition Senate. So he made recommendations to the Governor General, who appointed 8 independents. And I was one. I was the only woman and the first Rasta, the only Rasta who has ever sat in the Jamaican Parliament. I think that's perhaps my greatest achievement from what I have written. But in terms of what I've done in my life, it seems that having that job at Thames Television has been the most influential. And I had little to do with that appointment. I didn't make it happen. I just applied for the job and got it. But it's had such repercussions. I speak of it as today it's made lemonade out of lemons because it's created this award. It's made this award happen. What happened to me 50 years ago that was so painful and hurt me so very much, deprived me of income even. What happened 50 years ago has led to an award that's going to recognize Black journalists from here forward. And that's really great. I think if I've done nothing else in my life, that's been the most important thing that's happened in my life. So I'm really honored to be having this award named after me and to be able to have some influence in its beginnings. I'm really honored. And especially I have to thank that young Black journalist, Bree Johnson, for bringing me to your attention and saying, hey, this is a good idea. Let's do this now in this Black Lives Matter year. Let's do it.